PBC Amazon Prime kicked off their first event last night. New champions, new stars were born. Cruz showed the world that he's here for real, and he's not a hype train. A new factor in the 140-pound weight class division, and a new great dancing partner for a lot of fighters in that division, where Tszyu and Sebastian Fundura had a pretty decent match. Tszyu might be regretting a little bit taking that fight last minute, maybe not, but we have a new unified WBC, WBO champion in Sebastian Fundura, who has a lot of choices to make now, being that now Errol Spence seems to want a piece, Terrence Crawford wants a piece, and of course there's a potential rematch clause in the works as well. Either way, a lot to break down. We'll try to get out as much of it as possible on this episode, but at this point, let's go! Salute to the ATP Combat Media. It's your boy Rain. Shout out to all the subscribers. If this is your first time tapping into this content, I advise you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Go ahead, hit your bell icons as well so you can get all the alerts when this content is dropping. So great night for PBC last night. Showed up, showed out. You know, it was PBC and Amazon Prime's first event together, and I got to give credit to where credit is due. Real great event, packed out stadium, it looked like, packed out arena, wherever they were at. A lot of great fights on the card, the co-main event, even the co-main event and the main event did not fall short. Congratulations to new champions that were crowned last night in Cruz, who really took advantage of Romero, who just, looked like he was trying to implement some new things. But, once again, very similar to the Deontay Wilder-Joseph Parker fight. Once you get to that part in your career to where you're on the big show, the big stage, very difficult to go ahead and transition into complete different approaches to the fight. We can talk about that a little bit more, obviously. And, of course, shout out to Sebastian Fundura and Tszyu, to be honest. But Sebastian Fundura being crowned a new unified champion in the junior middleweight division. Shout out to Tszyu as well for putting on the best performance he could. Unfortunately, suffered a really bad cut on the top of his head. Well, an injury that you're really only going to get when you're fighting somebody who's 6'6", with that kind of an arm reach, was kind of what I was alluding to in older videos that I made, as far as variables that we had to see how Tszyu was going to make these adjustments and dealing with that. And it looks like ultimately, jumping in and jumping out and trying to, establish distance, but at the same time, Fundura trying to establish distance, but in the same time, Tszyu trying to maintain a mid-range game so that he was going to be able to reach Fundura when he found those opportunities. Looks like he also put him in space to get hit with an elbow, as Fundura is so tall. The way he holds his hands up, Tszyu also trying to stay compact and low as he was coming in. Hit his head on that elbow, and unfortunately had a bad cut very early in the match, but still lasted for 12 rounds in the fight, and was able to actually make it a very close competitive fight. But Fundura was able to be disciplined and do something that also people were worried about, because teaching old dog new tricks and the way that theory works. Sebastian Fundura showed that he's not that old of a dog, that he was able to come in with new different new parts of his game and arsenal that he was able to bring to the table, which was being able to use his physical attributes that he brings to the table, the long arms, the height, working to establish and keep that distance, to force Tszyu into situations to where he would have to take risk, right? He would have to take risk to jump into mid-range areas to where he could be effective with his own weapons that he brought to the table, and Fundura was able to maintain that. Now, the blood coming down from that real gruesome cut that was on top of his head was definitely a factor in the fight. Nobody can deny that. Tszyu having the white blood out of his eyes, I'm sure, was burning. Not to mention the lack of a full camp didn't really give him that many opportunities probably to bring all types of different elements to the ring for adjustments for situations like that where he maybe could have adjusted a little bit differently. Also, the cut man in the corner also brought into a little bit of scrutiny. A lot of people feel like, and even me for myself, I didn't take this into consideration, but if they would have stopped that fight earlier, like inside of the first 4 rounds when the actual cut happened, that would have actually presented an opportunity for Tszyu to go ahead and get an immediate rematch. It would have gave him that full camp that he would have needed to prepare for Sebastian Fundura, and also, let's be honest, padded his pockets a little bit, right? Getting a check for that fight and them having to pay him for another fight, not to mention a rematch clause that would have been in the space. So if Tszyu would have lost that rematch, would have given him an opportunity to get another rematch, right? So you have to think that management, trainers, cut men, all kind of different things that you have to take into consideration, could have given a different outcome for Tszyu. What's going to happen moving forward with Tszyu and Sebastian Fundura? Well, naturally, there is a rematch clause in the contract, but if you guys did keep an eye on the fight, Errol Spence did come into the ring. You guys know Errol Spence tweeted out days before that he was going to fly out to Vegas, that he'd be interested in getting the winner of that match. You know how PBC kind of works. People don't all know this, that Tszyu's not exclusively signed to PBC, and being at PBC seems to me to be hyper-focused on keeping belts in-house and keeping fights in-house. We'll see how it plays out if Tszyu gets the respect that I think the PBC owes him, because he did save the card. Let's be honest, with Keith Thurman falling back and him having to go ahead and take a 6'6" southpaw puncher in Sebastian Fundura, he put his pride, I don't want to say put his pride to the side. His pride was probably there. That's probably why he took the fight as well. But, other fighters might not have been so reluctant to agree to a 10-day replacement that provided all the different obstacles that Sebastian Fundura provided Tszyu. So him doing that, as well as continuing to fight for 12 rounds and keeping it competitive, I think he's owed a rematch. I don't think too many people could argue as to whether or not he's owed it or not, but we have to, remember and always take into consideration that the PBC does function in a certain way, especially when they have the belts. They seem to be very protective of that, right? And a fight with Errol Spence is an in-house fight for them. If Errol Spence is even able to take those belts off of Sebastian Fundura, even better for your Al Haymans and your Leonard Ellerbys, who are interested in probably bringing back the Errol Spence crowd that was there and getting that Errol Spence pay-per-view money and stadium money and all the, take advantage of that following that Errol Spence brings to the table. But in the spirit of boxing and competitive boxing, some might say a little bit of integrity as well. Salt, put it on top like a little bit of seasoning salt, that, the right thing to do would be to allow Tszyu to get an opportunity to right the wrong, to make the adjustments, to get the training camp in, and give him a fair chance of getting himself lined up for a rematch. Obviously, also aware of Terrence Crawford also already activating his WBO mandatory. He activated that. The WBO, I believe, put out a message saying that they would activate that this following week, that they would be doing that. So ultimately, the price of fighting an Errol Spence for a Sebastian Fundura would potentially be, more than likely be, a vacated WBO title. So Sebastian Fundura also has to make that decision as well as to whether or not he's willing to go ahead to vacate that belt. I don't know if he has so much of a choice in it as well. This is a PBC thing, but becoming a brand new unified champion, only 2 belts shy of becoming an undisputed champion in that division. If Sebastian Fundura is interested in becoming undisputed, I would think he'd be reluctant to vacate the belt, but then again, he's a PBC fighter. You don't know if they're promising him the gold and the glitz and the fame and all those things that come with being a big superstar prize fighter. Maybe he'll make that choice to pick the currency over the legacy, as Floyd Mayweather Jr. Always says, or has said it at least once before in his career, right? So a lot of things to take in consideration in that fight, but more so all over, just congratulations to Sebastian Fundura. Great performance. I thought it was a real breath of fresh air to see Sebastian Fundura taking advantage of his reach, taking advantage of his height. I thought he could establish even more space, that he could have used even more reach, but that comes with time. It looked like, for me, he was definitely looking like a fighter who's doing something new, something that we're not used to seeing him do in fights. So I'm sure he's trained on doing it before, but until you're doing it in the ring, you really don't know what you're going to get. That confidence is not the same as maybe the second time around when he's maybe fighting against Errol Spence, or whether he's rematching Tszyu or fighting a Terrence Crawford. Whatever it looks like, you would think that it would get better, but it takes that leap of faith to go ahead and do what Fundura did, which was come in as like I like to quote the great Mike Tyson. He didn't dance or leave the party with who brought him to the dance. He actually got to the dance, but he may have left with somebody else, right? And but it might have been a good move, right? Because now he sees the possibilities, hopefully, in using those physical attributes. And I hope to see Sebastian Fundura continue on this path and continue on this trajectory, adding a new chapter into his career, so where he becomes this fighting tall, long arm reach using fighter. I think that's a very difficult fighter to defeat in the junior middleweight division. When you look at the broad spectrum of the complete division right now, somebody who's officially knows how to use that jab and use that distance could present problems for the best of the best in that division. And he could dominate and become an undisputed champion in that division if he's able to master that technique. So Sebastian Fundura, new WBC, WBO, he's a unified junior middleweight champion now. Congratulations to him. Now, as far as Tszyu Cruz and Rolly Romero is concerned, another great fight on the card. We knew going into this fight that this was going to be an exciting fight. Both of these guys come in with exciting pedigrees, the way they fight. They like to stop their opponents. There were questions, obviously, that needed to be answered in this fight. One of them being how Tszyu Cruz is going to adjust to the 140-pound weight class division. Was he going to come in slower now? Were there going to be some disadvantages for him? Was his power going to translate into the division and make him a factor? Because the way he fights, power is a big part of his repertoire, right? It's a big part of what he brings to the table is his ability to hurt you. And if he can't hurt you, then he could become less of a factor in the division. On the Rolly Romero side of the conversation, we wanted to see if he was going to become more defensively responsible. Was his power going to be able to neutralize and stop Tszyu Cruz from coming in as he normally does to all the fighters? He doesn't respect power too much. It doesn't seem like anybody's actually ever really hurt Tszyu Cruz. Even Gervonta Tank Davis, who fought against Tszyu, never seemed to was able to actually hurt Tszyu, never stopped Tszyu from pursuing him and going for the knockout. So was Rolly Romero going to be able to do that 140 pounds and take advantage of his what would seem on the surface being a height advantage, weight advantage, size advantage, just overall advantage? The only advantage he didn't have coming into the ring was his boxing IQ that we all, well, a lot of us, including myself, I got to include myself, question, where is his IQ at? He's so many holes in his game that we saw that you got to wonder against Tszyu Cruz, you want to patch those things up. Well, the match goes, and it looks like Rolly Romero did work on a lot of things. He was trying to establish distance with that jab and try to force Tszyu Cruz to take risks to get into range to be effective, and trying to be the taller fighter, the longer fighter. But Tszyu Cruz, to everybody's everybody's happiness, was able to translate everything. The power worked. He was able to buckle Rolly early in the match and continue to put Rolly in danger until he ultimately was able to get a stoppage in the fight. Just constantly pursuing Rolly throwing out that jab. In my opinion, I thought Rolly was pawing with the jab more than throwing it efficiently. I thought that was an issue. He looked like he was trying to almost hold Tszyu Cruz back instead of inspiring or what's the word I'm looking for here? Discouraging Tszyu Cruz to pursue him. He looked like he was trying to hold him a little bit, and it just wasn't working. Tszyu came with a lot of pressure, and it looks like Rolly was caught off guard a little bit with that pressure. Seems like he didn't have the answers that he might have been working on during the camp. Trying to become a boxer all of a sudden in the biggest fight of your life just seems like an ill-timed choice. Seems like Rolly would have been better just embracing who he really was and really just trying to let his hands go and see if he can connect with something. Now, would this have gotten him a win in the fight? Let's be honest, probably not. Tszyu brought that pedigree, and also his power was translating. He was hurting Rolly Romero multiple times in the fight before the stoppage actually happened. So would it have changed too much? Probably not. I just feel like maybe Rolly Romero would have had a better chance of winning the match, and it would have been that much more entertaining to see Rolly throwing back and maybe even hurting Isaac Cruz at some point in the match. But ultimately, what the way the match panned out was Rolly was trying to move a lot. He was moving pretty well, trying to get away from Isaac Cruz. A lot of big analysts in the game thought that this fight would be over inside of 3 to 4 rounds. He was able to take it up into like the 7th, 8th round and survive. And credit to Rolly, never actually falling down, never actually even taking a knee. The ref had to go in there and stop the fight. So the warrior spirit in Rolly did prevail and show that he had the heart of a lion to be in the ring, but it also showed that he had too many holes in his game, and that Isaac Cruz and also a lot of other people, when you look at that fight, a lot of other people you're looking at in that division, you have to ask yourself how effective and how much of a factor is Rolly Romero going to be on that division, boxing the way he did. A lot for Rolly Romero to think about, I'm sure, taking into consideration whether he might consider moving up in weight, which I don't know if that's going to make it any better for him, but maybe give him some opportunities to make some big fights again to get some money. I'm not sure what he's thinking about, or maybe even considering, dare I say, some sort of retirement if he's not going to improve but so much. Not sure, but Rolly Romero definitely left a lot of questions that are open now, that a lot of people in their heart, I think knew, but seeing it in action, you have to ask yourself, what is Rolly Romero's next step is going to be? You guys let me know what you think he should do. Should Rolly Romero just continue moving forward, maybe get himself in the ring with another championship, maybe try to get a Subriel Matias, or maybe fight like a Gary Antoine Russell or Richard Hitchinson, or some contenders in the division who don't hold belts but are still top contenders. I don't know. Like I said, for me, I don't see him being very effective against these guys. I think there's a lot of guys in the division, in the 140 pound junior welterweight division or super lightweight division is stacked to the ceiling with so much talent in there. We got to see how that turns out. What's his name? Erilandi Lara performed, he did what he did. Unfortunately, shout out to Nonito and Rachel Donaire. I know they were they're a married couple, obviously, but also were, head trainer and assistant trainer for that fight. I know they put a lot of work into Zarafa, into Mike Zarafa. Nonito going out to Australia to train him, and Rachel, from afar, remotely training him for his conditioning and making sure he was as ready as he could be for this fight. But styles make fights, and also there are levels to this game, and it just seemed like Erilandi Lara just showed that he, there's levels to this game. You're just not on the same level. Once you get over here stateside and you start competing with these top level champion fighters, you're going to deal with high levels of IQ and high levels of ring generalship and understanding. And Erilanda, goodness gracious, Erilandi Lara was, don't forget that a lot of people thought he beat a Canelo Alvarez, right? He's competed on a very high level, and he's a veteran to the game, and he just really beat him with a basic one pull. It was like a pull shot, and then he just hit him with a right, caught him, and just put him down, and he wasn't able to come back from that. But shout out to the Donaires, shout out to Mike Zarafa, hope he figures it out, makes a better comeback. You're set up for a bigger comeback now, we'll see what his next moves are going to be, and how he feels about that. Erilandi is looking like, in my opinion, maybe a Danny Garcia, possibly. It seems like they've been trying to work on a fight for a very long time, so maybe Danny Garcia will find himself in the way of that conversation, and we might see some things develop in the coming weeks to see maybe if they are able to plan something. But congratulations to Lara. Congratulations to not playing with your food, showing that there's levels to this game, and not just anybody should be in the ring with him. But overall, a lot of fights on the card as well. On the undercard, Carmel Moulton also had a showing that I thought was a good showing. I know a lot of people wanted to criticize Carmel for lasting in the full 8 rounds. People see him stopping people, get used to it too quickly, and they have a hard time watching him actually being a boxer. And he had a lot of dog in him in that fight. I thought he had a lot of great moments in that fight. Fighters like that benefit off of those rounds. When you're getting those rounds in, they just develop better. They get more of a understanding understanding of that ring, of themselves, of who they are. They jump into their identity a little bit better. When you look at somebody like, let's say, Edgar Berlanga, who started off his career with like 16 knockouts, you see how he struggled in his development as a boxer. That now, as he, is moving into being a big championship fighter, trying to campaign for fights against the likes of a Canelo Alvarez, or people that we anticipate him fighting at some point, like a David Morrell or David Benavidez. Well, David Benavidez has moved up to light heavyweight, but he can always come back. But even a Jaime Munguia, the top level fighters that are in that division, we have to understand it. And a lot of people would agree that Edgar Berlanga has some more developing to do. Those rounds that he didn't get when he was younger are showing up today as inexperience in the ring. So, Carmel Moulton able to get those rounds in. Those were great rounds. He had a great fighter that he fought against. He had a winning record. I think he was like 7 wins and 0 losses almost, if he wasn't undefeated. So, a great fighter, either Cuban or Mexican heritage. But, they're giving him the right fights. Good matchmaking for him. I thought he did well. He won the fight unanimously from my perspective. I thought he had a lot of great moments in the fight, showed his IQ, showed his ability to move and use his shell stance to make a lot of shots miss, and was able to counter very effectively. I thought Carmelo did great, and I see nothing but more greatness coming from him. Fans need to become fans of boxing who don't see what that kid showed yesterday, who thought that, he's exposed now, or everybody's about to start kicking his back. And you guys got to watch boxing a little bit more. I thought Carmel Moulton did real good last night. I mean, obviously, there's spaces that he can improve in, that he'll look, and he'll look to improve. But that's what those kind of fights are for, right? When you're building a fighter and he's trying to find his identity, everything's not going to be perfect. But for the most part, he showed that he's a high-level fighter, and is going to be a factor in the near future for anybody in the division that he's in, right? So, but you guys let me know what you think. Just wanted to go ahead and tap in, give my perspective on what I thought of the card. I thought it was a great PBC card for the first card. It was a pay-per-view, but with the last-minute replacement of Sebastian Fundura, I thought it brought a lot of life to the card. The co-main event and the main event did not sell us short. Keep in mind, once again, Errol Spence will see what he wants to do if he's going to fight Sebastian Fundura. And what do you guys think he looks like fighting against Sebastian Fundura? Ladies and gentlemen, I think Sebastian Fundura is an awkward fighter for anybody to fight in that division. I think fighting against somebody who's 6'6" with that kind of arm reach, who's standing behind his physical attributes, brings issues for anybody who's going to fight in the ring. We don't know who Errol Spence is today in comparison to who he was before. In comparison to who he was before Terrence Crawford, right? So after Terrence Crawford and suffering a great loss like that, has Errol Spence changed? Is he going to be a different fighter? Keeping in mind that Errol Spence is also supposedly in legal discussions or potential legal disputes with his ex-trainer in Derek James. So he'll be bringing in some new trainers into this fight, I would think. And how's he going to react to that? How's that going to change for Errol Spence? You know what I mean? Who's he going to be coming into that ring? We're dealing with fighters who are in transition phases in their career, where they're becoming new fighters. They're transitioning into new chapters into their career, where you have Sebastian Fundora, tapping into his arm reach and his height and trying to take advantage of those things and being disciplined and being that kind of fighter. And then you come full circle to an Errol Spence who we don't know what he's going to bring to the table. Is he going to be the same fighter he was with Derek James, where he's tearing people up at the body and just overpowering people, or is he going to become a little bit more boxing friendly, you know what I mean? Establishing a jab and taking his time and counterpunching and being slick and being that kind of fighter? Or is he going to be that come forward fighter that he was with Derek James? Time will tell that story better than I could or any of you could. But still, what do you guys think? What direction is he going to go into? And also, as far as Isaac Cruz is, what's the next step for Isaac? I mean, what's his next fight? A lot of people are screaming out Subriel. I mean, I think that's an exciting fight, but Subriel is no longer under PBC. So will the PBC, concede or compromise, not concede or compromise the integrity of their stable by going outside of PBC banner to go find the best fights for the fighters that they have under their stable? We see what they're doing right now with Canelo Alvarez and getting him with Jaime Munguia, who's over at Golden Boy. maybe that's an opportunity. Maybe that's an example of the future of the PBC, that they'll be doing a lot of cross promoting and providing opportunities for the fighters in their stables to fight the best fighters that are in the world that may not be underneath the PBC banner. Time will tell the story, but Isaac Cruz and Subriel Matias, maybe a Barroso, a fighter who a lot of people felt like beat Rolly Romero and was robbed of a victory, who is now an interim champion in the WBA, pretty much has a right as a mandatory to fight against an Isaac Cruz. So maybe we'll see a Barroso and an Isaac Cruz meet up at some time in near future. Bottom line, though, is a 140-pound weight class division has a new superstar in it, a new moneymaker, a new great dancing partner. Isaac Cruz also showed that he had a huge following in the building that night. He might have gotten the biggest cheer out of everybody who got cheered on that night. Might have been Isaac Cruz, who was the star of the show last night. Amazing how, Mexican fighters and their Mexican fan base, Mexican fan base is one of the most loyal fan bases in the space. Once they find and they see you and they see the talent in you as a Mexican fighter, they gather behind you loyally. They're very loyal to their fighters, and it looks like Isaac Cruz may have tapped into a fan base that might have not necessarily been there as much as they are right now. I heard rumors that he went from like 300-something thousand followers on Instagram to north of 900,000. I don't know how true it is. I didn't do the research myself, but Isaac Cruz really opening up a lot of doors for himself and his family last night. So you got to give him a big round of applause for that. And we'll see what the next steps are going to be for him. Guys, let me know what you think the next step is for Isaac. Tell me what you think the next step is for Tszyu, Errol Spence, Terrence Crawford activating his mandatory. And what's the next step for Sebastian Fundura, and Tszyu? He has some healing to do, probably according to Stitch. That it'd probably be somewhere closer to about 90 days for him to heal that. But he said also that's a good spot. That shouldn't be a problem. There's not too many fighters who are going to provide the same adversity that Sebastian Fundura did, as far as fighters punching him on top of his head. It'd have been different if it was maybe over an eyebrow or under his eye somewhere. That cartilage could present problems in the future. But where the cut's at, I'm sure his ego and his pride is a lot more hurt than the top of his head as far as Tszyu is concerned. So we'll see him come back stronger, hopefully, see what fights he can line up. Maybe him and Terrence Crawford are still a conversation. If Sebastian Fundura does choose to go with the Errol Spence route, then the WBO belt will be vacated, and maybe there'll be opportunities in there for Tszyu to get back in a conversation of maybe getting that belt back by fighting against Terrence Crawford, or maybe, I don't know, maybe somebody could fight I don't know. Let's just keep it at that. Keep it there at this point. Let me know what you think, guys. Remember, if this is your first time subscribing to the content, please subscribe to the content. If this is your first time watching the content, hit your bell icon so you get all your alerts when the content drops. And please fill up the comment section with what you think. I love interacting with you guys. But at this point, it's your boy Reigns, that ATP Combat Media Show, and we out.
They hate when you elevate. They stacking up losses, I'm handing them out, yeah, I had to go delegate. It feel like I'm floating, I'm lost in the moment, I swear I could levitate. They never believed it.